It is finally race weekend again in Phoenix, Arizona. Glad to have you here on the Inside Lane. I'm your host, Devon Henry. And joining us here for this week's action is the guy who's going to be seeing the most action here this weekend up in the booth. Joining us in the Inside Lane, he's a motorsports broadcaster of over 5 decades, the 2013 historic Trans Am Lime Rock Park race winner, and a 2019 inductee of the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame. The driver of the 1966 305 CID Ford Mustang, and also the play-by-play announcer for the NASCAR Cup Series on Fox from Windsor, Connecticut, it's Mike Joy. Mike, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Devin. Good to be here. Thanks.
Hey, well, to say it's been a crazy year so far would be quite the understatement. The season opener won by Glendale, Arizona's own Michael McDowell, not one of the higher budget teams, and has been one of the most consistent drivers to open up this year. Mike, what is with the parity here in 2021?
Well, Devin, there's a lot going on. First of all, last year was supposed to be the final year of the current NASCAR race vehicle for their premier series, the NASCAR Cup. However, due to COVID, supplier delays, and just all the general uncertainty, it was decided to extend this car's life cycle through 2021, and the new car will debut next year. With that, NASCAR put a freeze on development to save the team's money. And that, plus some additional enhancements to the inspection and rules enforcement, has meant that the smaller teams have had a good chance to catch up. So we start the season with essentially 4 big surprises. Now, the top teams in this sport and even the manufacturers are kind of built on what Joey Logano once called the big 3 and me platform, because you have a lot of 4-car teams and manufacturers with 4-team alliances. So let's start with Daytona. Ford's biggest teams are Penske, Stewart-Haas, and Roush. They're the big 3. The and me is Bob Jenkins' Front Row Motorsports 2-car team, which just won the Daytona 500 with Michael McDowell. So then you go on to the Daytona Road Course. Joe Gibbs Racing is the top Toyota team, and the big 3 there. You know, you have Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex, and Kyle Busch. The and me is newcomer Christopher Bell. He wins on the Daytona Road Course. So let's move on to Homestead. Hendrick Motorsports, the top Chevrolet team. And arguably the and me at Hendrick is William Byron, with 1 career victory prior to this season, the least of anybody on that team. And Willie B wins Homestead. Then you come finally to Las Vegas last Sunday, and Kyle Larson, who already had 6 Cup wins with Chip Ganassi Racing, was suspended and out of the sport for most all of last season. And was he going to win a race this year? Yes. Was he going to win right away? Well, nobody really thought so until from the final pit stop on, he dominated at Las Vegas. So 4 races, 4 somewhat surprise winners. And all of a sudden now everybody's talking, oh my gosh, who's going to miss the playoffs? Who's not going to make it? Who's going to be good in Phoenix? Will Stewart-Haas show up? They used to dominate there with Kevin Harvick. Kevin has struggled, and the rest of that team has not performed up to par. So, wow, a lot of storyline. And, you know, where's Denny Hamlin? He hasn't been to victory lane. Where's Kyle Busch? Where's Chase Elliott? Where's Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, Ryan Blaney? Lots and lots of question marks. Maybe Phoenix, we thought Vegas, but maybe Phoenix will give us maybe a clearer picture of how this regular season is going to play out.
Yeah, the 1-mile dog-legged oval now coming up on the schedule, and we have had 2 thrilling races on not-so-cookie-cutter mile-and-a-halves. And with NASCAR hosting the championship again in 2021, not everyone is favoriting the racing action at Phoenix. So do you think that Phoenix Raceway can keep up this action that we've had the first 4 weeks of the year? And do you see the championship potentially staying at Phoenix for the home in the near future?
Answer the first question is, I think it's going to be largely dependent on the timing of caution flags. Phoenix has become known as a long run racetrack, long green flag runs with green flag pit stops. And we do know that that tends to scatter the field a bit instead of having them nice and tightly closed up on the restarts. Now, of course, we're going to have the two stage ending restarts, and the stage lengths are all different at Phoenix, one to the other. So that'll help, but the tightness of the racing is going to depend on the number of restarts. As far as Phoenix continuing to host the finale, I think there's a 99.5% chance that the championship will be decided at a NASCAR-owned racetrack, which Phoenix is. They've put a lot of money into that track recently. And so for the near-term future, yes, that's the side of the championship. But like the Super Bowl, which moves every year, I think it's very good for the sport to have the championship race, to maybe spend a few years at one racetrack and then move on and have different venues be responsible for deciding the champion. Maybe not every year, but let's say every few years.
And you might be sticking around maybe in the Phoenix area. Barrett Jackson, canceled in January, postponed, moved to March now. Phoenix known for its championship hosting abilities, and I feel like Barrett Jackson, when they come to Westworld at Scottsdale, it's one of those kind of championship-like atmospheres with how much they bring to the table. Does it feel like, though, that the Phoenix area is becoming an even larger hotbed for classic cars than it even used to be? It was already big enough. It feels like it might be getting bigger.
It has always been one of the hotbeds for classics and restoration, and that goes all the way back to when Craig Jackson's dad founded the company, half a century ago, and started doing auctions of high-end cars from the 30s in Scottsdale. The climate there is very conducive to preserving older cars, just as they preserve old airplanes out there in the Arizona desert. To be able to be used for parts and for rebuilding. Same is true of classic cars. And that's how all this got started. I think if there are a couple of, we don't call them junkyards anymore, but let's say auto recycling centers, it's a kinder, gentler word. If I am looking for trim parts for a 50s or 60s car, or other pieces of, let's say, unobtainium for a restoration, first place I'm going is Phoenix. And there are a number of places there that still cater to the restorers and the preservers, whereas back east, where I live, most all of the former yards, instead of letting cars just sit out until somebody wants those parts, those cars are getting recycled and they're getting chewed up, and those parts are lost and they're gone. So, and yes, for preserved cars, you've got the weekly cruise night, which I know has been suspended due to COVID, the longest continuous running cruise in America up until COVID, and 500 cars, and it's all pretty well organized. And there's like a median down the middle, and the domestic cars are on one side and the imports and the motorcycles are on another. And it's a wonderful scene. I always aim for there when I come to Phoenix for a NASCAR race or for Barrett Jackson. And Barrett Jackson did a great job last October of hosting an event in Scottsdale at Westworld, partly to get some cars in circulation and to service their clients, both their consigners and their bidders and buyers, but also to show the city, the county, and the state of Arizona that they could put this event on safely without a spike in COVID, and that they were taking necessary and reasonable precautions for having such a large event. Now, to make that event successful, you've got to have on-site bidders. You've got to have a lot of them. And that's why, one of the main reasons why Scottsdale and this big anniversary celebration of Barrett Jackson was pushed off from January to March. But it's going to be a 7-day event, March 20th through 27th. They're going to auction cars from Tuesday through Saturday. A lot of exhibits for folks to see, a lot of demonstrations and hands-on and things. So it's a great automotive event, even if you're not there to bid and buy, even just to show up and walk around and get a feel for all of it, talk to the consigners, see the cars for sale, see what they sell for. It's a lifestyle event every much as it is a car auction.
It is the most beautiful labyrinth I think I've ever fallen myself into. So a lot of fun. Might we be seeing you? I know it's a week after race weekend. There's 7 days.
Yeah, it's going to be a week after, and that unfortunately doesn't fit our Fox schedule because that weekend is when NASCAR goes back to the dirt for the first time in 50 years. Not since September 1970 at Raleigh, North Carolina, on the half mile, where Richard Petty won, has a NASCAR Cup race been held on a dirt track. And Fox, which is my primary employer, is holding a lot of different events and telecasts that whole week leading up to the Bristol Dirt Race. So for the first time in 16 or 17 years, I'm not going to get to go to Scottsdale this year, but I'll be back on History and FYI with the coverage in June when we come back to Vegas in mid-June.
Well, excited to bring it back out here to the West Coast for those car auctions and, of course, the great car shows that come along with them. Talking to Mike Joy here on the Inside Lane, getting ready for Instacart 500 weekend Phoenix Raceway. Sunday's Cup Series coverage starting on Fox, 12 p.m. Arizona time. That's 3 o'clock Eastern. Race starts just after 12:30 local time. A couple more points that I want to touch before I let you go, because life's been crazy for everyone, not just the race car drivers, the crew members, but for you guys in the booth as well when it comes to COVID. 2020, crazy year. Your children are getting to the age where they're stepping out into the world. So as a father, how have you navigated working through COVID with your family?
My kids are both in college. They are both studying remotely. Neither one is happy about it. My wife's thrilled that they're home most of the time, but they would rather be away at school. And boy, I get that. That's a big part of the college experience is being there on campus and experiencing everything that college has to offer. So we're all looking forward to everybody getting vaccinated and, getting back to life more as normal. I've had both shots. I'm fully vaccinated, so I no longer have any reluctance about the weekly travel that's required to do our job, or about being in close proximity to Jeff and Clint up in the booth, or to our production people when we have meetings. But most of what we're doing now, right up to the calling of the actual event, we're doing just like this meeting. We're doing it on Zoom or on one of the other similar platforms. And we find we're able to be almost as productive compared to an in-person meeting. And certainly at less cost for the company to be able to do things this way. We learned a lot during COVID about how much of the telecast we could do remotely that worked, and how much that worked as well as if we were right there on site. So last year, we were calling the races from the studio in Charlotte. And we could have gone to the races. NASCAR would have allowed it. Fox would not. Their COVID protocols were much stricter. And Fox went to extraordinary lengths to give us a view from the studio, just like our view from the booth, and try to replicate that experience as much as possible. But as we've often said, there's nothing like being there. So this year we are back at the track, and we're glad of it. But our graphics department, they were working from Los Angeles, and production was being done in Charlotte. And of course, the cameras and direction was all being done at the track. You really can't move that remotely. You can't do a whole telecast with a robotic or remote cameras. And now most of us, but not as many as, say, in 2019, are back at the track and working in a familiar environment. The thing I miss most is the lack of interaction that we have with the drivers and teams and crew chiefs and owners. People we used to see on a weekly basis, say hello to, and kind of get a little bit of insight from, we don't have access to, except by telephone or text or email. So that makes things difficult. As a family, we started out quarantining, after trips, and we kind of lessened that more and more and more as all of us stayed asymptomatic, and nobody in our family has had COVID. So, but like I say, the vaccinations go a long way, and I would urge anyone, if you are offered the vaccination, take it. There's no scientific reason not to, and it's been proven, the science has proven that if you are vaccinated, you almost certainly will not go to the hospital, and you'll be around to watch racing and for us to talk about it for a long time.
One last thing before I let you go, because you have been a staple in this motorsports community in general for so many decades. I mean, you started this journey doing stints between autocross racing to go to the PA booth, and finally somebody goes, hey, you need to get that oval track, and you're like, it's just a bunch of jalopies going in circles. Why do I need to do that? But for NASCAR, where do you see the sport going? So many changes next year, and where do you hope it goes?
Well, it's hard to imagine that it's come so far. And I think the one thing looking back that's very difficult to figure out is how we went from being the number 2 sport in America in terms of attendance and TV ratings in 2007 to the slide that I really thought we had arrested, and maybe we haven't in viewership as everybody goes to online pursuits and different things, and they're not sitting at home on Sunday watching TV anymore. What happened? You know, back in 2006 and 7, you couldn't walk down a supermarket aisle without stumbling over a cardboard cutout of a NASCAR driver hawking something. And I think one of the biggest changes we've seen is a reduction in the number of consumer products and services being advertised on these race cars. And that hurts because while all of these B2B deals are good for the teams and they're good for the sport, but they don't get the sport out in the mind of the consumer to where he has to say, wow, I need to tune in Sunday. I want to see how my driver does. I want to see how that car does with the product on it that I use and recommend. So that's been very difficult. We're now seeing things like that coming back. We're seeing more consumer advertising, I think, this year. And one I'll point to is back in January, when a company ran a large campaign and it featured Denny Hamlin, and the girl goes, hey, Denny, nice PJs. 2 things happen out of that. One is eventually you remember Domino's Pizza, that was their ad. And the other thing is, yeah, hey, Denny Hamlin, race car driver. I want to tune into the race to see how he does. And I think casual fans, people who will watch the sport if prompted, they need those prompts, or they're not naturally going to tune in. And that's not unique to NASCAR. It's true of almost every sport except the NFL, where tune in is a given on Sundays. So to answer your question finally and look ahead, I think the sport has a bright future as long as consumer goods and services companies continue to be involved at a high level and extend their branding beyond having a car on the track and beyond having commercials on the race telecast, things like Domino's Pizza did. So you get a sense of Denny Hamlin other than just being in the car at the racetrack. We have new owners in the sport. Michael Jordan owns a team partnered with Denny Hamlin. Pitbull now has a race team with Daniel Suarez as driver. So I think, again, extending the reach of the sport, both at the owner level and the viewer level, can only help it grow. We've got a new car coming next year. We've got a lot of new racetracks this year, including 7 road race courses, which is 5 more on the schedule than we've ever had in the Cup Series. So I think there's a bright future out there. I think there's a very sustainable business model. I'm just happy to be a part of it for as long as I have, and hopefully for a good number of years to come.
Well, Mike, it is a pleasure to have you a part of NASCAR for so many years, and it will be great to have you out here in Phoenix for Instacart 500 weekend. Coverage starts on Fox, 12 p.m. local time. That's 3 o'clock Eastern for all you guys back east, ready for action here at Phoenix Raceway. Mike, appreciate the time. Glad to have you over here where it's nice and sunny this weekend.
Can't wait to get there. We'll be on the plane here in a couple of days. Devin, thank you.